So first we're going to go into sparkling wines. What is sparkling wine compared to white wine, red wine? Enough carbon dioxide is introduced into the wine to create the effervescent, to create the bubbles. They have some of the greatest infrastructures and capabilities to pair with things like oysters and other shell and seafood, an amazing opportunity to pair with salads, and just as a primer to your meal, like the opening aperitif, they're incredible, though I know a lot of you do that. So what we have here is the Signor Beppe V8 Plus Prosecco. I'm a huge fan of this wine for a couple of reasons. I just like the way it tastes, to just be a little bit human. I love the bottle. I just think it's fun. A lot of people get a kick out of it. But what I really like is the quality that we're seeing at $11 to $15 when compared to $25 to $40 champagnes is quite an aggressive battle. If you were to taste 15 wines blind and then rate them in order, I promise you a couple of Proseccos will break through. I mean, Beppe's making some tremendous sparkling wines in the region. Their V8 Plus is incredible, and I'm super excited to give it a sniffy sniff and break down the taste and the profile of this wine for you. What makes a champagne is it comes from Champagne in France. Period, end of story. What a lot of Americans don't know, unfortunately, and definitely not beginners, no matter where you are in the world, is in the old world, Europe specifically, wines are named after where they come from. Versus the new world, America specifically, Chardonnay, Cabernet, Merlot, we name them after the grape. So that's why Champagne has its name. That's the place in France that it comes from. And that's really the only difference, other than subtle things like, for example, Prosecco, which a lot of you have become big fans of. You like them because they're a lot less expensive, $11, $12, $13, $14, $15 versus $20, $30, $40, $50. The thing that allows that is when the carbon dioxide is introduced in Champagne, it is on a bottle by bottle basis. And with Prosecco and other sparkling wines, specifically Prosecco, big tanks in bulk creates more efficiencies, drives down the cost, and creates a category of sparkling wine that is far more affordable. The thing that I would really recommend is to understand that they age for a very long time. I think people drink their champagnes way too young. And another little fun fact is when you look at a sparkling wine or champagne bottle, oftentimes you don't see a vintage, a year on the bottle. Most of them are non-vintages, which means the grapes are coming from different years. They're picking the grapes, putting them in vats, and they're blending it, keeping a base of what the juice inside the tanks, and they keep blending it and blending it and blending it. When you get into hardcore champagne, you do see vintage wines, 1990, 1999, great years where you can really enjoy the wine just from that specific vintage. But much more than red wine and white wine, you see wines from sparkling wines that are non-vintage. The reason we even got to sparkling wine was a lot of the white wines in the early days, pre-science and technology, were very high in acid, and this was a way to kind of tone that down. So many of the white wines were almost undrinkable. And this method allowed people to consume it. It took out the edge and made a lot of the wines a hell of a lot more drinkable, definitely more enjoyable. And out of it was born this incredible category of beverage. Necessity creates tremendous innovation. I'm very thankful for all those crappy white wines hundreds of years ago that created this amazing category. Let's talk about serving sparkling wine. One of the things that a lot of people, the colder the better for a lot of people. That's number one. So in general, getting it a little bit colder, fridge, ice dynamics matters. Number two is opening it. Little fun fact, if you're always scared to open champagne, it's because you're probably going straight up, which allows it to pop. Just a little tilt, call it 2 o'clock, and popping it will save you spilling any of your beverage and will make you look cool. As you can tell, I'm using a white wine glass here instead of a flute. You're more than welcome. This is an ongoing debate in the wine world. There's some subtle benefits, no question, from the oxygen hitting the sparkling wine in its world. I don't love to get hung up on glassware. I don't want to buy too much into it. But serving it cold, popping it with this tilt, trying to pour it with the tilt of the glass as well so you don't bubble it up too much. Those are core serving tactics. In a champagne glass, for sure. If you're lucky enough that you can afford different sets of glasses, knock yourself out. I'm not against it. Is it a major prerequisite? You're talking to a guy that's very comfortable in drinking wine out of a Dixie cup. Let's evaluate the wine. So first, like we said, we're gonna look at it. Again, because this is a course, I kind of talked about the evaluation visually. It's when you can line out 15 Proseccos and look at them contextually, where you can say, oh, this is darker, this is lighter. It starts getting a little bit more interesting. Now, the part I really do care about. Let's go into the sniffy sniff. So the first thing that comes across is a huge component of almond paste. That's right, almond paste. I get a little nuttiness. It's a continuation of that almond. I get a little hint of mini pear. and almost like, gosh, I don't remember. You know those jelly candies that have sugar on it? You know what I'm talking about, right? Like just like jelly kind of candy that has some sugar on it. The yellow one, I get a little bit of that. Let's give it a whirl. Yeah. White flat peaches, you know those weird white flat peaches you see in fancy places? White flat peaches, a beautiful, beautiful flavor profile of acacia flowers, really intriguing acidity, but not too much, so just like a spritz, almost like a Bellini, if you know, which is really delicious. Very smooth, incredibly long finish. I'm still tasting a little bit of crushed rock on top of that white peach, and huge complexity. You know, just to give you context as I'm running through this terminology about smooth, just the way it feels on your mouth. There's a creaminess, there's a smoothness versus kind of that jagged, rigid, kind of bitter or sparkling sensation. Though you can get smoothness in a sparkling wine because the more it comes to your palate, the less the bubbles are bouncing, and now you just get into the flavors and it could be smooth. You know, as I taste this wine, what's lingering is almost like a walnut component. Though it tasted like almond paste on the front palate, there's a walnut component that I'm still tasting right now as I was talking about the finish. Though, you're only gonna get so much for wines in the teens. This doesn't have the longest finish. One of the big differences between a $50 champagne that I would adore and this wine is that I'd still be tasting that champagne right now versus this kind of fading away at this point of me talking. When you pair wines, you can really go with opposite or matching tastes. It just depends on what your palate enjoys. What you don't want is conflicting tastes, right? Don't forget, palates are very personal. There's a preference game here, so don't get caught up. If anything, no matter what I said here, please don't try to form into me. Just try to find yourself. So a delicious wine and a screaming value, but there's an enormous array, if you're unable to find this, of Proseccos. Nino Franco comes to mind. Just incredible array of $12 to $17 Proseccos in the marketplace today that bring outrageous QPR, quality price ratio, comparative to the rest of the sparkling wine world.